Now, for an in-depth analysis on Zimbabwe's election results, we are now joined in studio by political analyst Levindo and political strategist R.C. Lumumba, who, of course, is also an ordinary member of ZANU-PF. I don't know, in which capacity are we talking to you?
We can do both.
We can do both?
We can do both.
Well, I'm not so sure if we'll succeed, but let's try. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Well, today, Chamisa comes out, he says, look, I'm taking this thing on a legal review. The president-elect comes out, he says, this is legitimate. Are we in for a rough ride?
No, I think you have to separate legal process and legal lunacy. Legal process mandates that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission announces and the duly elected. And if anybody has a query to the effect, they approach the courts. Legal lunacy is where you have absolutely no regard or reverence of the law. Right from when the voting was stopped on election day, Nelson Chamisa announced the results. He said, well, we've already won. We've already won. We're just waiting for ZEC to now just come and qualify that we've already won. We're not going to accept the defeat. So there is a problem with their understanding of what is legal and what is not legal from the very beginning. Understand this. Nelson Chamisa, MDC, have never been able to understand the word defeat. If an election happens in MDC and anybody loses, they start a new party. Morgan Tsvangirai went to an election. Tonight Biti would lose as Secretary General. He left, started his own party. Washman Ngube lost as Secretary General, started his own party. Atam Tambara lost as Secretary General, started his own party. Every time anybody loses an election, it's always, no, it's not my fault, I was rigged, I'm going to start my own political party. Now they come to the big stage. They've lost an election. Everybody who should be mocking the election says, no, you actually lost, guys. Nations who sent observer teams said you lost, and now we didn't lose. We'll tell you our results because we know better than all the experts. We know better, even though we've never really held any real jobs in our lives. We just know better.
Levindo.
Yes, I think one would have expected what actually happened in Zimbabwe, especially with the MDC. Remember, during the campaigns, the MDC made it clear that they are not going to accept anything except the MDC win.
Yeah.
And obviously, when now you see the MDC coming out and actually rejecting the results, this is what was expected, because they actually had actually indicated that they are not going to accept the results. But if indeed they feel that they've been robbed, or there was something wrong that took place in the voting process or in the counting process, the best way to do is to actually follow the legal process. And then they must be able to present concrete evidence.
Yes.
But I think what is very, very important for the MDC would be to avoid taking a route that would compromise them as a party. And that would make people become suspicious of them as a party. Look, there are a number of instances where there were elections in Zimbabwe, and the MDC would always cry that they've been robbed or elections were rigged and so on and so on. But for now, I think what is important is to provide concrete evidence.
Which Chamisa says they have.
If indeed there is concrete evidence, that is what they should present. Remember, there were elections in Kenya, yes, between Raila Odinga and Kenyatta.
Yes.
And the Raila Odinga team took the matter to courts, and then the courts saw it differently. If indeed there are proof and evidence that the elections were rigged, I would actually advise the MDC indeed to follow the legal processes.
But what is wrong with Chamisa saying, I have won? That's political rhetoric. I mean, that's basic in political science. We understand that.
Here is what is wrong, and that's why I say there is a difference between process and lunacy. The law in Zimbabwe clearly states that no candidate or no polling official or any Zimbabwean or any, whether participating or not participating, is allowed to announce the electoral result before the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission does so. There is a reason they say this. It's process. Let me tell you what happens when you do that. You incite I don't know if you follow boxing. If you ever watched the fight between Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor talked a big game, told the whole world, I will slice this guy out in 2 rounds. To the extent the world started believing that maybe, just maybe, Conor McGregor can take off Floyd Mayweather. Guess what happened? Conor McGregor got knocked out. So it doesn't matter how many times you say it or how loud you say it. The only litmus test to did you win or did you not win should be the vote. You can't judge a rally. You can't judge an opinion poll. The only thing you should judge is the people. Don't ever disrespect people to the extent where you say, no, their vote doesn't matter, my opinion matters more.
Do you not believe that Nelson Chamisa is right in what he's doing by taking the legal route?
I think he is desperate, but I understand his desperation. It's coming from when Raila Odinga is your mentor, which he is, and you bring Kusi, I think his name is Gisemi, Raila Odinga's advisor, into the country during elections under the auspices of an observer. You find the traits of what happened in Kenya are identical to Zimbabwe. What did Kenya do? First thing they said, Raila Odinga, before the votes were even counted, Raila Odinga said, I won. Second thing, he came out, he said, I dispute those election results. My election results are correct. Let's go on the street. Exactly what MDC did. Third thing, he says, since you're not listening to me, I am going to inaugurate myself and I'm going to announce I'm now the new president. Trust me. Nelson Chamisa is headed exactly in that direction. And then he says, now that I'm the president, I'm going to give myself executive powers, except the military is not listening to me. So can the world come and participate and give me a back door into government? Nelson Chamisa and MDC are looking for a back door into government. They have no other play. If they don't do this, you tell me, what else can they do? This is the only play.
They are lawyers. They're probably going to practice. But Levindo, when Chamisa was about to address the media, the police came in and harassed my colleagues, lots of them, and intimidated them, basically didn't want them to cover that press briefing, right? But something very interesting then happened. SK Moyo was dispatched by government to come and issue an instruction to the police to say, move away from this venue, allow Chamisa's press briefing to go ahead. Do you think ZANU-PF is somehow trying to manage the image, its image, and perhaps the image of the country, to say the world must not see us to be suppressing these fellows?
I followed the developments of the press briefing.
Yeah.
And as the story unfolded, apparently there seemed to have been a view that there was a political meeting going on. But also at the same time, you know, you need the authorities that are cautious about the situation in Zimbabwe, especially looking at what happened after the elections were announced. A lot of people have lost, 6 people have lost their lives. A lot of cars and buildings have been destroyed. But I want to appreciate the manner in which the president himself handled the matter, because he's the one who said, we need to allow the political processes to actually unfold, allow free political space. Yes. Remember, during the campaigns, in a very, very long time, you would see all different political parties in Zimbabwe participating in the campaigns and all the activities very, very freely. And I think what ZANU-PF has been trying to do now was to say, we are a peace-loving organization, and we also accommodate other political parties as they exercise their own activities. But indeed, for me, Zimbabwe seems to be still very tense, and you need the authorities to be very, very cautious so that we don't experience another loss of lives.
Chamisa says he's going to lobby, if I may use the word, South African president and the international community for the sake of the people of Zimbabwe.
What that means is we are going to go to the world and we're going to ask the world to put sanctions on Zimbabwe. This is what they've always done. Understand there is precedence to this. You can look at a track record. In 2008, when the election was a shamble, and I agree it was a shamble, perhaps the most horrific election we've ever had, the first thing MDC did, led by Tendai Biti. Well, in fact, Tendai Biti was leading to say, let's get on the ground and fight. Morgan Tsvangirai went to Botswana first before he went on his world tour, and he said to the world, let's put ZANU-PF and let's put the country on sanctions, because when the people are suffering, they'll feel like ZANU-PF is making them suffer so much, they'll vote ZANU-PF out. It's always the strategy they use, go for sanctions. Just this afternoon, Tendai Biti has a cable to Washington, to Senate, requesting a meeting that he wants to come and he wants to present the case in Zimbabwe. Why would you go all the way to America to tell America, who is in Zimbabwe, by the way, through the observer mission team, that Zimbabwean election was not free and fair, don't recognize that government, keep the sanctions on? The last time they were in America with Nelson Chamisa, they requested for the sanctions to stay in part enforced through the Zidera Act. The trouble you have with these ideas of let's go out to the world and let's lobby is they're not lobbying for the people. They're lobbying for themselves. They want to sit on the table so they can eat. You say they're lawyers. You tell me who wants to be represented in court by the leader of the opposition party under this new dispensation. Which businessman says, I want the leader of the opposition to take me to court, maybe my chances are good? They're toxic in business. They're toxic in politics. This is the only play they have, and they're going to sweat it for what it's worth.
But why should we believe you? You are a ZANU-PF member after all.
I'm not asking you to believe me, I'm asking you to believe science. I keep saying to everybody, stop listening to the voices, look at the facts that are on the table. There is over 50 observer missions in the country.
Why can't you then give Chamisa a chance to present what he says is hard evidence, which is going to be tested in a court of law?
I am so glad you've asked that, because that's all I've ever said. We've said, Chamisa, before you send kids on the road to die for you and in your name, can you please show us how you were rigged? Before you quickly run to say, we are going to defend the vote, before you tell them, go, 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 just show us one. Just one. You say out of the over 10,000 polling stations that were there, there are V11 forms that you say you have. Today, you even kind of tapped them and they say to the journalists, anyone wants a copy? I've got them right here. Till now, till this very second, over 6 hours later, we don't have a single copy out. Show us one V11 form that says...
He said he cannot, display his evidence, because that's something that is going to be put through...
And therein lays the fault in his argument. You tell me what is the reasoning behind saying... I mean, what compromise will happen to you showing journalists that you have evidence that will compromise your case in court? Like the court will say, oh, no, we don't recognize that evidence because journalists saw it? No. Really? No. Is the very idea of going to court not that court can validate your claim? What is the claim? The claim is, I have V11 forms. But by the way, they were sending out V11 forms earlier on in the day on election day until they started losing. They were sending them out. So your claim to court is, I can prove. And then journalists say, great, can you show us? Okay, don't show us what you can prove. Tell us where. Can you tell us which polling station? Tell us one. Out of the hundreds you have, tell us one, can't name one.
What do we take out of these elections?
We had two front runners who were very close. And obviously, you would get some section of the population not happy with the results, and that is very normal. But I think what is very, very important for me is that whatever action that the MDC decides to take should not, at the end of the day, compromise the same existence of the MDC. For an example, if the MDC would then decide to take the matter to court,
yes,
they must be having concrete evidence, and the court should rule in their favor. If the court does not rule in their favor, it will mean that indeed the MDC is comprised of the crybabies. Number two, if they decide to form another government, if they decide to behave like what Raila Odinga did, they should embark on an action that is consistent. Because if they try it and they fail, they will actually be saying to the people of Zimbabwe, we have tried every legal strategy and we've failed. How are they going to be able to come back and convince the people to still support them? But another thing for me is that you need political maturity. You need politicians who are able to say, there is life beyond elections. And I think Zimbabwe needs the MDC, Zimbabwe needs ZANU-PF, Zimbabwe needs all the citizens of Zimbabwe. And if they start to be divided like they are now, Zimbabwe is actually going to collapse. And if you have to build a nation, you need to bring all the political parties together, forget about their own personal interests and focus on building their nation. And I think that is what the different political groupings in Zimbabwe are supposed to be doing.
South Africa doesn't have the best history when it comes to dealing with Zimbabwe's electoral issues. Do you have confidence that this time around, in the event that Chamisa indeed gets an audience with President Ramaphosa, South Africa can somehow emerge unscathed?
What the political residue of the relationship between South Africa and Zimbabwe is, Cyril Ramaphosa right now chairs SADC, so he's the big boss for the region. So everybody has to go and cry to him if you have any issue, so he can convene a meeting should the need be. Angola is chairing the Troika, and Angola takes lead from South Africa in that regard. So you've got South Africa important from a SADC perspective. Then you've got South Africa important from a home affairs immigration perspective. In 2008, when things fall apart in Zimbabwe, 1 million South Africans came into Zimbabwe. That million became 3 million over a space of 8 years. So now you ended up with 3 million Zimbabweans as a result of political instability in Zimbabwe. Another case of political instability in Zimbabwe could add more millions in South Africa. Now, South Africa does not want that. I can tell you, South Africa does not want another million Zimbabweans. That's a whole different ballgame South Africa is looking at. So, Cyril Ramaphosa entertaining Nelson Chamisa is to, number one, say, what's your story? Number two, can you validate your story? Number three, don't create a problem for me, because don't allow your chaos to not become my chaos. The reason why Cyril Ramaphosa today came out and issued a statement congratulating President Emmerson Mnangagwa is Cyril Ramaphosa has got Madam Lindiwe Zulu, who's leading the SADC Parliament team in Zimbabwe. He's got the SADC team in Zimbabwe. He's got the South African Embassy and its observers in Zimbabwe. And he's got the ANC observers in Zimbabwe. He has all the intelligence he needs to make a decision as a president. A president makes a decision based on the set of facts presented before them. So he has the facts, he made a decision, he looked at it and analyzed and said, it's clear President Emmerson Mnangagwa has won. He would have never said that had that not been the case. So he will entertain him, yes, because he must, but nothing will come out of it. Zimbabwe will move forward, SADC will move forward. Nelson Chamisa is just being a crybaby, making a lot of noise because he likes the fame, but nothing is coming out of it. Zimbabwe will move forward.
One of the things that I picked up as we go, go towards concluding, it appears tribalism plays a very important role in Zimbabwean politics. People tell you, look, Mashonaland, MDC won't see any game. They can take Bulawayo, they can take Harare, but, you know, Midlands, or, you know, it seems to be all about Shona Ndebele. Yeah.
Well, I think those are some of the sentiments that are being said out there, but it's quite unfortunate that we have got those kind of sentiments. But Zimbabwe has always been in support of ZANU-PF, and that is confirmed by the elections. Tribalism would always play a very minor role because people are being clubbed or segmented according to different tribes. But I think that is one thing that nations have to fight and ensure that we don't have to talk about tribes, especially when we're talking about political parties, because when you expect people to vote or support you, you actually don't look for a tribe, you look for a human being. And what you do as well is that a political ideology does not recognize a tribe. It focuses on what can be done best to address the challenges that are actually facing the nation. But another aspect that I wanted to look at is that for me, it will be very much premature to have anybody in Zimbabwe who will start running to the international community. Because number one, Zimbabwe still has to address its own issues right in the country as Zimbabweans themselves. Look at all the processes within Zimbabwe. Another aspect is that Zimbabwe remains a sovereign state.
Yes.
And as a sovereign state, Zimbabwe must be able to address its challenges, and then beyond all the other means, then they can still have to go outside to get assistance from other countries. And I think as well, as I've indicated, political maturity is important because beyond elections, there should be life in Zimbabwe, there should be prosperity in Zimbabwe, and the fights that are actually happening in Zimbabwe do not assist the citizens of Zimbabwe because they actually polarize them, and it will be very, very difficult to bring all Zimbabweans together and build a united nation. And
gentlemen, unfortunately we have run out of time. I'm sure this is a matter that is going to be with us for quite long. I'm sure once the law firm which Chamisa referred to, which is in the south of Limpopo River, clearly it's somewhere in Sandton, I suppose. Once it gets briefed, we'll be able to talk more about the issue. Thank you very much for your time. Well, that was political analyst Levindo and political strategist S.C. Lumumba talking to us about the developments in the Republic of Zimbabwe.
Hello.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.